All right, so the first one is 24-42. Today we're going to be winning some chess games with just principled logical chess. Now, I'm choosing to play the French defense, but you could choose any opening that you like. Just ensure that the opening that you choose, you're able to play principled, basically. So knight to d2 was played. I'm going to play the move pawn to c5 here, just to challenge his center. And then once he takes on d5, I'm actually going to go ahead and play queen takes d5. Now, you shouldn't be developing your queen too early on in the game, but for one, this is theoretical, and he wasn't able to attack my queen because his g2 pawn was hanging. Now, after knight f3, I'm going to take the pawn on d4. It's not really a free pawn, though. It's only temporarily. Usually after bishop c4, once we move the queen, they're going to be able to eventually win the pawn. So what I'm going to be doing here is focusing on my development because that's the important side of things. So let's start by playing the move knight to f6, develop my knight, getting the knight out. And then after knight b3 hitting the pawn, I play knight c6 and not necessarily guarding the pawn, to be honest. I'm just trying to develop. Now, after knight takes d4, I'm going to trade on d4 because there's always going to be some threats of knight to b5 to hit my queen and then threaten c7, which is going to be a fork. And with that being said, there's different ways of playing this. There's different ways of playing this. Bishop to e7 should be okay. Bishop to d7 should also be okay. Bishop e7 seems to be very principled though. If bishop e7, knight b5, I'm going to play queen to c5 and protect the c7 square, and this bishop is going to be under attack. So let's go with bishop e7. Eventually, I'm going to get my king out the center of the board. Now, pawn c3 was played. Now, the question is, what do we do here? Because knight b5 will always be a threat. Let me get the king out the center of the board first, just so that we're safe. That's principal chess. The goal is to develop castle. Queen to f3 was played. Very good move. It's also preventing me from playing b6, which is very annoying. Let's pull the queen back to c7, attack the bishop. And then my plan from here is to play bishop d7 followed by bishop to c6 and get my bishop out. Now, this knight on d4 is actually very strong, by the way. So if I have to give up my light squared bishop for this knight, then I'm just going to do it. Now, if the bishop goes back to b3, there's a little idea where I could play pawn a5, just with the main idea of playing pawn a4, to gain some space on the queen side and attack the bishop. Bishop to f4 is usually a threat, but right now it's not a threat because his bishop is under attack. Let's see what he's going to play here. So the bishop went back to b3. The bishop went back to b3. I want to play a5, but I'm wondering if knight b5 is a threat. I don't think it's a threat though. I want to play a5. I'm also wondering if bishop to f4 is a threat. Bishop f4, there's pawn e5. I'm not necessarily going to win anything because the bishop will be able to go back to g3. And then maybe then I'll play a5 and then hit the other bishop, forcing the bishop to move. My queen is going to be the only defender of my pawn on e5, so I have to be careful. Let's go though. Let's go with a5. a4 is an idea to prevent me from playing a5, which is what the opponent did. Now I'm going to go bishop to d7. So the plan is to play bishop d7, bishop c6 hits the queen. And the good thing about this is, yes, I'm going to be giving up the bishop here, but after knight takes, my knight is going to be on the d5 square. And I'm never going to be worried about any pawn going to c4 to attack my knight because my knight can always go to b4. So that's the whole idea here. Bishop to f4 though, that's the only worry. What do we play if the bishop goes to f4? Do we play e5, bishop g3, or do we just move the queen to c6, then play bishop to c6? So bishop f4 was played. This is the critical point in the game. Play e5, bishop goes back to g3, and then I have to play something like queen c5. And his knight is going to be under attack, but the knight is just going to go to f5. And I don't really like that position, to be honest. So I'm going to choose to put my queen on b6. Now, another thing, so now my plan is to play bishop c6 hits the queen. I need to just not fall for any little checkmating idea because I'm not going to lie, there's going to be a lot of pieces pointing towards my king. Rook to e1 is usually an idea because my bishop on e7 is going to be an unprotected piece. And once the rook goes to e1, there's going to be knight f5. And then if I takes, there's rook takes e7. So that's something that I have to be very careful of. Now, I'm trying my best not to play too slow. But okay, rook to e1 was played, which means knight f5 could be a threat. With that being said, bishop c6 hits the queen. If knight takes, pawn takes, and this is going to be under attack, bishop c6 hits the queen. If queen g3, there's knight h5. Bishop c6, hits the queen. That's what we're going to play. If the knight takes on c6 and I take back with the pawn, his bishop on b3 is going to be under attack. So I really like my position with black, to be honest, especially since eventually my plan is to play knight d5. Rook to d8, followed by maybe rook to c8 is also an idea because I'm trying to get all my pieces in the game. But right now, I think black is doing perfectly fine. This is some theoretical stuff, though, to be honest. So there's two moves that we're expecting. Is he going to take the knight and say, hey, I have the bishop here? Or is he going to move the queen? I think moving the queen may not happen because I'm not really seeing good scores for the queen unless he plays queen e3. Queen e3, there's bishop c5, and then that's like an annoying pin. And then if queen to d3, there's rook to d8, also an annoying pin. So he will take on c6. And then I'm going to quickly take on c6. Okay, let's take. Now the bishop is under attack. I probably could have captured with the queen. And then if I captured with the queen, I'm like, okay, I'm not losing. And I managed to equalize. But I'm just playing like this because I want to win. So bishop to c4, that's definitely just poisoned. Because if I take rook to b1 and queen c2, bishop here, queen takes, bishop h7, and I lose the queen. So let's not get too greedy here. Let's just follow the game plan. The plan was always to play knight to d5. So knight d5 hits the bishop. Bishop e3, I takes. Knight d5. If he takes, I takes, and I'm fine. Let's go knight d5. I'm trying to keep up the time. I'm not saying I'm never going to be taking on b2, by the way. But all I'm saying is right now, the pawn is poisoned. So eventually, if he's not careful, I may take that pawn on b2, especially since his bishop is under attack. If he takes and I take with the c pawn, then I just have a very nice position because his b pawn will always be a weakness in this position. So we lost to a 2600, but it made us better because I'm seeing things better now. The other good thing is he's also using up his time. I'm a minute ahead on the clock, which is nice. Bishop to e5. That's a nice square for a bishop. Very nice square for a bishop. Because even now, if I takes, the bishop will always be guarding the c3 pawn. And queen to g3 is also an idea, trying to give some checkmating threats. Bishop to f6, there's more than likely he's going to take my knight and then take my bishop. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put my rook on the open file. Like rooks needs files. So let's put the rook on the open file, which so that way if he plays queen to g3 to threaten a mate, we do not have to push a pawn on the side that our king is on because we're going to be able to play bishop f8. With that being said, ensure that you don't push pawns on the side that your king is on. You should only push pawns on the side that your king is on if you're 100% forced to do it. I wouldn't mind trading off the bishops off the board though, so that way I'm able to get my rook on the b file. Otherwise, I may have to play rook a7, rook b7. And when I play rook a7, I'm always going to be worried about some bishop to d4 ideas. But that's what I'm thinking of right now. Okay, rook to e2. He finally decided to play a defensive move, just to guard the pawn. And do I play bishop to d6? No. Or do I play rook a7 to b7? How I'm going to think about this is whose bishop is better, mine or his? And I think his bishop is better because it's attacking my king. My bishop isn't really doing much. And usually you want to trade off your bad pieces or just trade off the opponent's good pieces because this is not necessarily bad. So bishop d6, bishop d4 hits the queen. I'll go bishop c5. And if the bishop goes back, then at least I'll say my bishop is on a better diagonal. Yeah, let's go with bishop to d6. I'm just trying to be careful that I don't make a blunder here. And I'm also trying to keep up the time because I have a little lead on the clock. So I'm just going to keep that lead. He doesn't necessarily have to move the bishop, by the way, but I'm currently threatening to take the bishop. And then if the rook takes, I take on b2. So he took, let's just take back. I'm never afraid of him taking on d5. He doubles up his rook, which means we have to think about some sacrificial ideas, which will never happen. Let's play rook to b8 here, putting my rook on the open file, targeting his pawn on b2. He plays pawn g3. And now I'm trying to put both of my rooks on the open file. Queen to c5 I like though, because it's an attacking move. And my eventual plan is to target his b2 pawn. So bishop back to d3 I'm expecting. If bishop back to d3, I could play rook to d8 and target the bishop. Bishop back to a2 was played. I mean, eventually he may still put the bishop on this diagonal. I'm going to pull my rook back to d7 so that way I'm able to play rook to b7 because his weakest pawn right now is his b2 pawn. So I'm trying to attack this pawn with all my pieces. Rook to e5. I'm not afraid of rook e5 because I'm able to take on b2 and attack his bishop. So he's not going to be able to do well. He could play c4, but I'll just take the bishop. So I still like my position, and we're still ahead by a minute on the clock. All I need to do is not blunder here, and I should be fine. And if I could get him to be making a lot of defensive moves, like the move that was his first defensive move. This was me just trying to reroute my rook. And rook to b7 is coming next. Okay, so he played rook to d2. I mean, the plan was to play rook to b7. I guess he wants to play pawn to c4. If pawn to c4, there's knight b4, but there's also knight f6. There's nothing I could do to prevent pawn c4, to be honest. So let's continue with the plan. Now I have two pieces attacking b7. That was the plan. He's just trying to defend his whole entire position. Now b2 is perfectly guarded. What if I play knight b6? Attack this weak pawn. And then if he plays b3, I go back to d5. Knight b6, I just need to ensure that there's no way for him to infiltrate my back rank, but he can't. So let's just keep playing attacking move. I'm going to put my knight back on d5 though. I think he just needs to play something like queen a4 here. The good thing is I'm the one who is attacking. He's defending. If he allows me to play knight c4, I will, but queen to e4 is not a hard move to find. I need to also push one of these pawns on the side that my king is on. Like, I want you guys to notice that I always say don't push pawns on the side that your king is on. But once it's approaching the end game where there's no files pointing towards your king, you need to just push one of these pawns so you don't get mate. For example, I'm assuming he wants to play bishop back to b1, threatening some checkmating ideas on h7. So me playing pawn to g6 in this position, we could say this is a prophylactic move. And if he plays something like h4, h5, then, he knows what he's doing for sure. Let's put the knight back on d5, which means h5 is going to be very hard for him to play. Because if he plays h5, knight f6 hits the queen, and I'm going to be winning the h pawn. And he also only has a minute on the clock, so now he has to speed up, which is he decides to play a5. But as we said before, knight to f6 is just a very nice move. It hits the queen, it hits the pawn, the queen has to move. I'm just going to take the pawn on the next move. And just like that, we managed to win a pawn. It doesn't mean that we're completely winning, though. It's still not going to be an easy game after something like queen to f3. Because if he allows me to play queen takes h5, it should be fine. Nah, if queen f3, the queen still targets c6. So queen f3, I'm going to take. So now I take. Now rook to d7. No, there's no rook to d7. What am I saying? Let's just take the free pawn. Take the free pawn. If he sack the rook, I take. Bishop comes in with check, I move. And then the queen has no checks on my king. So let's take the free pawn. Now that we're ahead by a pawn, I'm trying to trade pieces off the board now. Pawn to g4 is not bad. He's just trying to misplace my knight. Queen to g5 is an idea because queen to g5 pins the pawn, which means eventually my knight will be able to get to the f4 square. This is like offense is the best defense. It's also tactics. Queen g4. Is he able to attack my queen with the rooks? No. Is he able to take a free pawn? No, because I'm going to take on g4. So queen to g5 is just a nice move. Now I could play knight f6 and attack this weak pawn, or even knight f4 and attack his rook. And if I attack his rook and his rook has to move, his pawn on b2 is going to be hanging. Like, I'm not going to lie, bro. Why am I saying bro? I'm not going to lie. I think this was a good game that I played. I think this was just a good game. So if you play this line in the French, just know that I played maybe all the best moves. If my accuracy is not over 85%, then something is wrong. Knight f4 hits the rook. Rook to e4 is a move. And then there's pawn e5. There's also just a simple knight back to f6. Let's just play knight f6 and attack the pawn, especially since I'm ahead by a pawn. I'm not trying to complicate the game. Queen takes c6 was played. His rooks are still guarding b7. I'm actually able to take on b2, rook b2, queen c1 check. And then after the king takes, I take on b2. But let's play knight takes g4 because I'm trying to set up some checkmate. For example, knight h2, king h1, and then that's mate. Which is why he played queen d6 because he's basically guarding the h2 square. Okay, now I need to play fast. Takes, rook takes, check, king moves. No, that's kind of risky though. That's kind of risky. Okay, let's go here. Threaten a mate here. Okay, the king moves. Now let's hit the queen. I'm trying to distract the queen from the h7 square. And once we get the queens off the board, it should just be a smooth sailing conversion. Bishop to b5 is what he wants to play. Okay, I need to just play fast. We need to just activate the king. Let's go rook here. I don't know how he manages to catch me up on the clock. Okay, let's go knight d5. If he takes, I takes. Take on c3. Okay, the end game I'm not playing too well, to be honest. His b3 pawn and his c3 pawn is hanging. So now I'm going to take on, no, let's actually take with check and then take on b3. How did I allow all of this? I'm sure I could have converted this cleaner, but I'm still ahead by a pawn. Okay, let's go rook to f3. The plan is to play rook f6, so that way he just does not target my f7 pawn, and then I'm going to play. Okay, that was good, but now I get my rook behind this pawn. I think he's going to lose a pawn here. That was bad. Because once I play something like rook to f4, he's not going to be able to add more defense to the pawn. So for example here, now I'm just going to attack the pawn. Attack the pawn. Oh, there's actually a tactic. Attack the pawn again, and then I think he has rook to e2. That's a nice tactic. Because if I take on a6, he takes on f2. But now that the rook no longer guards his second rank, I'm going to play rook to a2, and I'm going to win his f2 pawn. So he moves the rook. Okay, now we take on f2 with check. Then we get back behind the pawn. Okay, first I'm going to go here to threaten the checkmate. And once I threaten the checkmate, his rook has to go back. Then I go here to win the pawn. So I only played a few bad moves in the... Oh my God. I don't want to get flagged. I have to pre-move. Okay, this is technique. This is technique. Technique. For this game, we got 89% accuracy. And as we said, the entire opening that was played, it was theoretical. We were both playing correct move here, just guarding the pawn. And bishop e7 was a nice move, just trying to get my king out the center of the board. And then after queen to f3, queen c7 was good. a5 was good. They wanted me to play e5, but I don't want to give up the f5 square that easily. So a4 was good. Bishop d7 was the correct idea. And then bishop to f4 was just surprisingly a mistake. And I'm happy that was a mistake because I didn't like that move. Queen b6 was also a mistake. I didn't want to play bishop d6. I think some part of me thought knight b5 was winning, but it wasn't. But queen b6 was a mistake, and then bishop c6 was the right idea. Now, once his knight takes and I takes and he moves the bishop, I'm assuming taking the pawn was not good. Rook d8 was a bit better, but centralizing the knight was fine. That move appeared to be the best move to me. Oh my lord, I think the pawn was poisoned. Couldn't he have tried to trap my queen? Yeah, oh, queen to e2 and then the queen comes back over, but that's risky, I'm not gonna lie. So apparently the pawn was not poisoned. And then from here, all my moves were just fine. It wasn't the best, but it was fine. My rooks are now very active. I'm attacking the pawn, he guards it. G6 was good. And then he blundered with knight h5. And then from here, I'm winning. Now, queen g5 was a very nice move. And all of this was good. And I saw rook takes b2 followed by queen c1 and then king g2, but I was just a bit scared of my back rank, and I just didn't want to calculate all of that with the time pressure. But if he checks and I move and then he checks again, I guess I'm able to block with the knight and then I'm completely safe. And that's why I played queen to h4, because once I get the queens off the board here, it's just easier for me to play. Now, I thought I wasn't playing too well here, but knight to d5 is actually not bad, because now once he takes, all his pawns are going to be hanging, and that's basically what I did. And the little thing that I did to win his pawn, that was so nice, because he's not able to guard the pawn, and the moment his rook moves, I hit him with this, and all of this is now just completely winning. 26-42. Let's play e4. This is probably one of the best rapid players on chess.com. And we're playing against a Sicilian defense. Looks like it's going to be a Nadorf variation of the Sicilian. All of this is some theoretical stuff, by the way. Let's take on d4. And knight f6 hits the pawn. We're going to play knight c3, develop the knight, guard the pawn. And we're either going to be seeing pawn a6. This is the Nadorf variation of the Sicilian. And I'm going to start by playing the move pawn to f3. If you start by playing bishop to e3, that's also fine. Eventually, it's going to transpose pawn e5. Your knight goes back to b3. And once their bishop goes to e6, your bishop goes to e3. So this is all theoretically correct stuff. Bishop to e7 was played. My opponent is now looking to castle. I'm going to play queen d2. I'm also planning on castling my king. Knight to d7 was played. And from here, I'm just going to simply get my king out the center of the board. So my king is castled. Their king is castled. Usually, we don't really have good scores to put this light squared bishop. So we immediately start our attack with moves like pawn to g4. Also very theoretical. And once I play the move pawn to g5 to attack their knight, they play pawn to b4 to counterattack my knight. We're 12 moves into deep Sicilian Nadorf theory. I'm not able to take their knight because eventually they're going to take and win a piece. So in this situation, white is forced to pull the knight back to e2, seeing that the knight on f6 is still under attack. And in these types of scenario, black usually pull their knight back to e8. And from here, we want to play f4 followed by f5. It's a pawn break, especially because it's opposite side castles. We want to start our attack. So I'm going to play f4. The main theoretical move is a5. Again, this is just so theoretical. But let's see where I'm going to go wrong. Pawn to f5 here hits the bishop. So even though they're targeting my knight and my queen side where my king is on, he basically just played the move pawn to a4. So I attacked his bishop, he counterattacked my knight. If I take his bishop, he takes my knight. So what I'm going to do here, I'm actually going to play a very cute move, and that's knight to d4. Now, yes, it looks like I'm about to lose my knight, but he's also going to lose his bishop because, okay, pawn to b3 was played, and whenever we see pawn to b3, what we want to do here is play king to b1. Because if takes, it allows some checks on our king. Knight c6 is a very nice idea, but then once they take on a2, the pawn is going to queen. So we have to start by playing the move king to b1. And then once they take on c2, we don't necessarily want to take with the queen. In this scenario, it's best to take with the knight because we're going to be using this knight as a good defensive piece. And eventually, they had to sacrifice the bishop. We take the bishop, they take attack the knight, and then we play knight to a3. So this is actually all theoretical stuff. Knight e5 was played, and then from here, it's just chess. So now I'm already on the lookout for moves like knight f3, hitting my queen. I'm thinking about playing bishop to g2, but I think I need my bishop covering my queen side. So I'm going to play the move bishop to e2, preventing any knight from going to f3. My pawn on g5 is still guarded, and it's just one of those regular positions. I want to play moves like f6 to start an attack. Rook to a4. That's a very nice move because now my e4 pawn is under attack. And this is where we have to just start being super aggressive because there's no easy way for us to guard the e4 pawn. Maybe I should have put my bishop on g2 actually. But let's start by playing moves like pawn to f6. Now, if takes, then that should be decent for me because I'm not going to have some lines pointing towards the king. So they take, I take. Basically, I'm sacrificing a pawn, but I'm trying to attack their king. I only have 6 minutes on the clock, by the way. But because of how theoretical this game is, I'm trying to ensure that you guys learn some stuff. Rook to g1 check, bishop h6. Those are my ideas. I think bishop takes, okay, knight takes was played because knight takes e4 is also an idea. But what if I just play bishop h6, hits the rook, knight takes hits the queen, rook check, and then after rook check, knight back to g6 is forced. Okay, that's actually very strong. My e4 pawn is under a lot of attack now. Okay, how do we do this? I don't want to start by giving a check. Wait, maybe start by giving a check, then play bishop h6, rook to g8. Let's try that. Let's try that. Let's start by giving a check, okay, he blocks with the knight. He blocks with the knight. So what I'm worried about now is just losing my e4 pawn. I'm thinking of playing pawn to e5 because the knight is pinned, but then he's going to be able to take with his e pawn. Once he takes with the e pawn, that's where I'm wondering, am I able to like move my queen out the way and attack his queen? Or do I just take his queen, take his rook, Let's try that. Let's try that. We're gonna be going into an endgame. I think I'm forced to lose my pawn on e4 anyway, so I'm just gonna go into this endgame because I'm the one with the bishop here. So hopefully the bishop here gets me something. So let's trade, and from here I'm trying to win this pawn. I'm also trying to apply some pressure to this knight. I'm thinking of bishop to, let's go bishop c4. Yeah, after bishop c4, it's going to be very hard for him to protect the b3 pawn. It's a very weird game, though. Very, very weird game. Like, with the bishop here, it should be hard for me to lose this. So bishop e7, let's take it the rook. Okay, rook e4. Now my bishop is under attack. So I have to find something good to do with this bishop. Okay, bishop back to d2. There's rook e2. Knight c4 I like because it just, yeah, let's try. Well, knight c4, there's knight d5, but let's go with knight c4 to guard the bishop because I need to get my knight back in the game anyways. I'm also thinking of bishop c2, which hits the rook, but that blunders the knight, so that's not going to work. Okay, so they got the king over, which means this knight is now free to move. I need to start pushing my pass pawn up the board. Okay, what do we play here? All right, let's give a check so that way my bishop is no longer under attack. So if you notice, my opponent is trying to get their king as close to the center as possible. That's also another check, which forces the king to d8. That's another check. Maybe I should start by playing rook to d1. So that way, now that I'm threatening bishop a4, he's going to be forced to block with the knight, and that could actually win the game. So rook to d1 is actually a very huge threat. Well, bishop a4 is a huge threat. My opponent is actually at risk of losing an entire piece here. So let's see the defensive move that they're going to play. Now, again, I am down by a pawn, but the fact that the position is so open and I have the bishop here and this king is slightly weak, this is more than enough compensation. I'm also thinking of knight d6 check, and after bishop takes, I take, and then I'm going to have two bishops versus two knights. So bishop to b4, which means if I check, the king gets access to the e7 square. Okay, check, king e7, not seeing anything. So more than likely, I just need to check. Yeah, let's just check and just take the two bishops. There's no way this is not compensation. It's two bishops versus two knights. I just need to play fast and not blunder, and I should be fine. His knight is also under attack. I'm trying to put his king in a little mating net. King to e7, I'm expecting. After king e7, okay, I need to do something with my rook. Let's play rook to b6. Rook b6 keeps the bishop guarded. Bishop to g5 is a threat to apply pressure to his knight. Rook b7 is a threat to check and win the pawn on f7. There's all sorts of threats happening here. I have 3 minutes on the clock, but I should be able to do something here. I am in love with my position. Now, there's this pass pawn that is very dangerous, so I need to ensure that I'm on the lookout for that. Okay, knight d7. Let's say knight d7. If knight d7, we just play rook b7 and then the knight is pinned, which means f7 is under attack. I should be looking for the checks, but knight e7 check doesn't really do much. And I also need to play fast. So let's go rook b7, pin the knight, which means I'm threatening to just take on f7 and win a pawn. Even though maybe I don't want to give up my bishop here. f6 was played. Very smart move by him. And now if I play bishop a4, trying to apply pressure to the pinned knight, there's rook to d4. Okay, bishop g7. Bishop g7 is a nice threat. Okay, bishop g7 is risky though, because I could get my bishop trapped, but I'm threatening to take the pawn, followed by taking the knight. And once I win back the pawn, it's gonna be hard to lose. I'm also trying to look for a way to win, to be honest, but I'm not seeing it. So the king moved out the way, which means that's now guarded. I need to, how do I continue my attack? Let's go rook a7 with rook a6 ideas, trying to win this pawn. If this knight moves out the way and I move my bishop out the way, then the h pawn is going to be under attack. And there's also some bishop c2 ideas. I just need to not blunder any weird forks or blunder a piece or just lose on time, and I should be fine here. So if check, I move. If rook b4, what do I play for rook b4? Um, if rook b4, bishop c2 or bishop a4 should be fine. So pawn f5 was played. Okay, my opponent is also pushing the pass pawns up the board, so I need to be very careful. Okay, I need to just constantly target the pawns. If I check the king, if I check, I'm thinking of bishop g8 actually. Let's try bishop g8. Nice, because we have to attack the pawns. I'm thinking about check. Like if he moves this pawn, then I check and I'm winning the knight. So he's not able to move the pawn. Rook to h5 though. He's able to play rook to h5. And honestly, well, if he plays rook h5, I should be able to take rook takes check. So knight back to e7 was played. Do we take rook h4? If I takes rook h4 and my bishop is trapped, damn, that's a nice move. Check. Okay, let's give a check here. So I can always play rook h6 if he plays rook h4. That's a nice idea. I have 156 on the clock. So the king moves out the way. If I check, okay, let's just take the free pawn. I'm at risk of getting my bishop traps, but if rook to h4, there's rook to h6. And if the position is equal and it's two knights versus two bishops, I'm not going to lose this game. I don't, I, I'm trying to find a way to win, but if my time goes too low, I may have to try to draw it. But let's see. So knight b6 was played. Uh, okay, let's give a check. Hit the king. King has to guard the knight. Hmm. Okay, king to e6 was played. Bishop f8. Bishop f8, that's a nice move though, because it pins the knight, and I'm already applying pressure. Knight back to f8 was played, which means my rook is now under attack. If I takes, I'm also trying to take on f5, but he has a check. So, okay, let's give a check here. I have 1 minute on the clock. Oh boy. Let's give a check. King back. Okay, king up was played. What to do? King up. Oh boy, what to do? Oh God, I don't know what to do. Takes, knight takes. Okay, let's check. And then I'm gonna just attack the knight on e6. Um, yeah, let's just attack the knight. Now I'm threatening to just take the knight. So, okay, what if I takes, knight takes? That doesn't do anything. Yeah, let's go here. Oh boy, how's the knights are working very well together. Let's just move. I only have 40 seconds on the clock. The pass pawns are pushing. God, the pass pawns are rolling now. I need to get my bishops back in the game very, very quickly. Bishop to c3 is the plan, to just hit the rook on the next move. Okay, let's hit the rook. Rook has to move. He's trying to keep this bishop out the game, which is a very nice plan. All right, let me just roll my pawns as well. Bishop b4 is an idea. Bishop b4 is an idea. I need to just roll my pawns up the board because he's also rolling his pawns. Oh boy. Okay, bishop b4. Let's hit the knight. My bishop is slowly coming back in the game. Knight c4. Okay, that was a nice move. That was a nice move. God, why is he playing so fast all of a sudden, man? Takes, then I have to take. I only have 20 seconds on the clock, man. And his pass pawns are just rolling up the board. Bishop to g8. That's the move I want to play. His knight is under attack. Guessing he's going to check. Okay, let's move. And then he's going to start rolling the pawns. Okay, let's get behind the pawn. Ah, that's losing. Oh, okay, let's check. Check. Ah, here. Oh, but then he queens. Such a weird. Oh, okay. I can't do anything anymore with 6 seconds on the clock. Yeah, this was very well played by my opponent. Yeah, and how it's just lost. Yo, this was a good game. This was a very good game. So I played at 81. The opponent played at 86. It was a very theoretical game, though. As I said, literally all these moves that I explained to you guys were all book moves. I'm trying to see where I made my first mistake. All of these were book moves. Literally everything. Knight takes, bishop to b3, takes, knight a3, knight e5. So this is all book move. Now let's see if bishop to e2 was incorrect and bishop g2 was the correct move. I made my first mistake when we were not in a book, which is crazy. So I needed to play pawn to h4 just to start my attack. Basically, I wanted to finish my development and protect the f3 square, but that was not needed. So rook h4, then I played f6 to start my attack. Again, I needed to play rook to g1, sacrifice the pawn, and then play f6. You know, at least we learned something. We learned something. So after knight takes, rook to what? They're saying rook to g1 was bad. And now I see why it's bad. There's actually a very simple tactic here. Bishop b5 hits the rook, and then once the rook moves, bishop h6, and then the rook is just trapped, which is crazy. Like, I did not see that. And then I still had the whole idea of bishop b5 followed by bishop h6. I had it, I missed it, and then now we're just in this endgame. You know, which it was a decent endgame. I'm playing a lot of good moves. My opponent is making a lot of mistakes. Apparently, knight d6 was a mistake. And if I had played bishop g5, then I would have kept some advantage. But I'm not gonna lie. If I was playing anybody else, I probably would have won this game with the two bishops. But my opponent defended so well. And then, okay, my time was also running out in the end game, and I wasn't able to find all the best move. Rook f6 there would have been nice. And okay, eventually my opponent started to roll the pass pawns. We were both low on time here, so almost every move was a mistake until I eventually lost. Yeah, at this point there was just nothing to do because once the pawn queens, this pawn is gonna queen. I have two pass pawns, but it's just lost. Okay, final opponent is 2460. Let's do another French defense. Okay, let's go d5. And let's see what version of the French he's gonna play. Maybe the advanced, maybe the Tarash. We're facing another Tarash. We're facing another Tarash. This is crazy. So if the main move is pawn takes, queen takes, there's also knight f3, which is just a completely different variation. But we are seeing pawn takes. Let's go queen takes. We just played a game with 89% accuracy, and we're gonna get back the exact same thing. So you guys should just know what's happening. Bishop c4, queen d6. He's gonna castle. We develop the knight to f6, preventing knight e4. And then after knight to b3, we play knight c6 to guard d4. So the only mistake that we made in the last game was when we played queen b6 instead of bishop d6. So if it happens in this game, then we're going to be fine. So let's take queen takes d4 is also an idea. Knight takes was played. Let's play bishop b7. Now I don't have to think about knight b6 because I just know that bishop e7 is fine. If knight b5, there's probably queen c6, queen to f3. That's what my opponent. Nah, it's not queen to f3 because it blunders the knight. It's pawn c3. So pawn c3 is what the opponent played in the last game, and I just immediately got my king out the center of the board. Now I want you guys to notice, because I know what's happening, I'm not really using a lot of time off the clock. Pawn to b3 followed by bishop to b2 is also a very aggressive way to play. I remember when I was playing with the white pieces, I used to play like this, like b3, bishop b2, a4, and then the bishop could go to a4 and attack the queen. Okay, immediate knight b5. Mm-mm. Based on the last game that I played, I was not afraid of knight b5. So now that he plays knight b5, I'm just going to move the queen. I'm assuming there's a correct and an incorrect square for the queen. Queen c5, eventually bishop's going to go to e3. So let's play queen c6, hits the bishop. And then once he pulls the bishop back, I may just play a6 to chase the knight. I may also just castle my king. So I'm not going to be surprised if after we analyze this game, knight to b5 attacking the queen is a mistake. Because maybe he thinks he got the tempo on my queen. But if you're playing your game and someone got a tempo, you got a tempo on someone, but they respond by gaining a tempo, then who actually has the tempo? Okay, now I just need to get my king out the center of the board. Just get the king out the center and then just play some chess from there. No, if I get the king out the center, there's bishop f4 and knight c7 is annoying. Castle, bishop f4, a6, knight c7, rook a7. That's actually not a bad line though. But that's risky. Why not just play a6? If a6, there's knight d4 though, and I'm going to be forced to move the queen again. So let's act. Castle, bishop f4, a6, knight c7, rook a7, pawn a4 to prevent b5, and then I play something like b6 to trap the knight. Let's try that. Let's take the risk. Let's get the king out the center. It's also a more principled move. Bishop f4, pawn a6. Okay, I thought I blundered my rook for a second, but if knight c7, rook a7, bishop e3, I should be able to play pawn b6. It protects my rook, and the rook attacks his knight, and his knight could be trapped. So I will not be surprised if my opponent just pulls the knight back to c3. The good thing is, if the knight goes back to c3, there's b5 hits the bishop, and then once the bishop moves, there's bishop b7, which threatens a mate on g2. And I think black has already equalized in this position, and now I'm just trying to push for an initiative. But white has already developed every single piece. So I still need to be very, very careful. So knight d4. Knight d4 made way more sense. Because obviously he has to gain the tempo on the queen. Now I need to find a square for the queen. Queen c5 hits the knight, knight b3 hits the queen. I'm trying to play b5, but I think I may have to play queen b3, bishop e3, grab the pawn. And maybe I should go for the same idea that I did in the last game with queen b6, bishop d7, bishop e6. If I'm able to play pawn b5, that would be very good. There's also queen e4 to get the queens off the board, but I don't think I need to do all of that. Let's just move the queen out the way for now. We need to finish our development. Bishop back to e3. I may play bishop c5 to hit the knight because even though in the last game they said that I should have taken that pawn, I'm not really buying it. Pawn c3 guards the knight and the pawn at the same time. Very good move. Now we play bishop to d7 and bishop to d. It just develops the bishop, to be honest. Now the d file is open and the c file is open, and we know that rooks needs files. So in a perfect world, we're going to be putting more rooks on the file. Remember what I told you guys about this knight f5 move? And I still forgot to defend against knight f5. Okay, rook d8, bishop c6. There's knight f5. I don't like knight f5. Hmm. Okay, rook d8, knight f5. Okay, there's just bishop f8. But then there's knight d6, which is very annoying. Okay, I'm going to start with rook to e8 just to ensure that there's no knight f5 ideas. And, there's some possibilities of me playing pawn e5 and forking his knight and his bishop. The good thing is, I just know that if the queen goes to f3, bishop c6 is a fine move because we won a very nice game before. Bishop e5 was played instead. Okay, that's a decent move. Eventually, I'm going to just put my knight on d5. Bishop c6. Bishop c6. Let's go bishop c6. Something that we tried and it worked in the last game, giving up the bishop. But we know that this is a good knight. And this knight is also going to d5, and I can always just play bishop to f8. Now we're in the middle game. All the minor pieces are out, and as I've been saying, it's time to get the major pieces in the game. So this rook on a8 is the only piece that is not doing anything. So if I'm able to play something like rook to d8, just putting it on the open d file, then that would be good. Okay, so knight takes was played. Um, Do we play queen takes though this time around? I think queen takes is fine because now we're able to try b5. Pawn takes wouldn't. I mean, pawn takes allow the knight to get to the d5 square, but I think queen takes followed by b5 is decent. Pawn takes, maybe bishop takes, rook d7. Yeah, let's play queen takes. We don't want his rook to be on our second rank. So I need to play rook to d8 as quickly as I possibly can. It's the only piece that I have that is not doing anything. And he has a rook on f1 that is not doing anything. Now, who is better in this position? I can't really tell. Based on my understanding of chess, white has no weaknesses and he has the bishop here. So maybe white is slightly better. All right, from here, knight d5 may not be too good for us. Knight back to d7, I like. Knight d7 forces the bishop to move. Knight c5 forces the bishop to move. Bishop back to g7 followed by g6. And that's just a very nice defensive position. I need to get my rook in the game, though. Get my rook in the game. Now, I think I need to play knight d7 first. Knight d7 hits the bishop because it's an attacking move. Bishop back to d4, knight c5, another attacking move. Bishop to c2. And then after bishop to c2, I play g6. And eventually, I'm going to play bishop f8. Now, let's just get the rook in the game first. Yeah. Let's just get the rook in the game first. So now we don't have to worry about, oh, this piece is not doing anything. This piece is not doing anything. There's also queen to e4. But again, based on my chess understandings, he's the one that has the bishop here. And since he's the one with the bishop here, going into an endgame may not be the best decision for me to make. Bishop back to c2. Now he's trying to create some threats on my king. I need to play maybe knight d5 actually. That's that's actually where we put the knight last time. I don't want to move the knight though and allow his queen. to infiltrate the position. Knight d5, queen h, knight d5, queen h5, or knight d5. There's queen here, but then there's pawn here. It's never losing. It's not losing. If I had to make a mistake, it's probably knight d5, but we're going to be looking on it because usually you want to keep the pieces on your king side guarding the king side, but we just know that a knight on d5 is good. The difference between this position and the last game though, if pawn to c4, knight b4, eventually the opponent will be able to play pawn to a3. So pawn c4, knight b4, there's actually bishop b1 followed by a3, which is a nice idea. So maybe I'd like to go into an endgame, but let's see. Pawn c4, there's knight b6. And I do not want my knight to be too far away from my king. Remember what I told you guys about attacking someone's king? You want to attack the pawns and the squares around the king. So all I need to do now is to ensure that my g7 pawn and my h7 pawn is safe. Right now, they're both being targeted. Queen h5 immediately threatens h7. Let's play g6. And if queen h6 threatens mate, I have bishop f8, which hits the queen. So I guess what he's trying to do is provoke weaknesses. This is something that you guys need to use in your games as well. Like, he's not necessarily playing queen to h5 like, oh, hopefully I get to checkmate him. Nah, he's basically trying to force me to push pawns on the side that my king is on. I'm thinking once I play bishop to f6 though, I should just be fine. Because bishop f6 next, just get the bishops off the board. And that's another strategy that I want you guys to use in your games. Like, whenever the opponent has the bishop here, your plan should be to at least try to get rid of one of the bishops. Now, I'm seeing bishop to e4 being a little threat here. I'm going to go bishop f6. And I'm not afraid of rook takes d5 because pawn takes rook and then my bishop is guarded. And if he takes, I play knight takes and I'm safe. Oh, I'm also ahead by a minute on the clock, which is crazy because it's just a regular position. Okay, bishop back to g3. He's not trying to trade the bishops, which is it's kind of the correct thing to do. Okay, now let's pull the bishop back to g7. Now my king is very, very safe. Pawn c4, still afraid of that. Bishop to h4, I will always be afraid of bishop f4, bishop h4. Because bishop h4 controls the d8 square, which is very important if I want to control the open file. So if he plays bishop f4, I may just play knight f6 hits the queen, and then maybe pawn e5 to support the knight. But it's going to be very annoying just having the knight and then the knight is just pinned. Actually, if bishop h4, there's bishop f6 and I'm fine. So the queen went back to e2. Not sure why. There will always be bishop to h4 that I need to be aware of. Pawn to b5. I mean, I guess he wants to play bishop e4. But let's play pawn to b5. Trying to have some control over c4. For example, nah. I was trying to make queen c4 an idea to weaken his b2 pawn, but that will not make a lot of sense. At least he's not able to play pawn to c4 anymore. And I'm thinking of knight b6 followed by knight c4 in this position. Okay, let's assume that his next move is going to be bishop e4. If he plays bishop e4 on the next move, my knight is pinned, so I have to quickly get out of the pin with maybe queen to c5. Okay, he plays rook to a1. He wants to play a4. If he plays a4, no. Let's play, nah. Knight b6, there's bishop e4. No, we're good. Knight b6, bishop e4, queen c5. All right, let's see. So knight b6, bishop e4, queen c4, knight c4. Let's try knight b6. Now is not the time to be making perfect moves because the time is crucial. Maybe pawn, okay, rook. Why did he play rook c1? That's such a weird move. Wait, did he just lost the game? Bishop h6 hits the rook. Nah. Bishop h6, there's rook d1 anyway. So let's just continue with the plan. Knight c4 hits the pawn. What I want him to do is move one of these pawns. Because if he move the pawn, it makes it weaker. Now we just move the queen to c5. I'm also trying to play rook to d2. So he moves the pawn, which means b3 is weak. I could play rook to d2, but then he just moves his queen. So I need to find something productive to do with the knight. And that move is knight to d6, hitting the bishop. And then once the bishop moves, I'm going to play knight f5, hitting the bishop on g3. And I may be able to get rid of his bishop here. His pawn on c3 is also hanging. Like, it looks risky, but bishop takes c3 followed by pawn b4 holds on to the bishop. I mean, this is going to be hanging. So he decided to give up his bishop for a knight. Pawn c4. I'm not going to take. let's push. Because then if I take, his rook is active. We know the whole saying, to take is a mistake. Now we're in opposite colored bishops. What I want you guys to know about opposite colored bishops is the bishop who is more aggressive and attacking is better. So bishop back to b1. I want you guys to notice the amount of attack I have on his f2 pawn. It's what I'm trying to do now. So pawn to e5, my bishop is clearly better than his, because his bishop is pointing towards a pawn chain, while I already have a battery pointing towards his f2 pawn. And then my next move is to play rook to f6. So rook to d2 was played. Let's hit him with rook to f6. Now I have 3 attackers. Yes, he has 3 defenders, but maybe he has to play some ugly defensive move. Okay, but what do I do with this rook? So queen back to e1, and he blundered. His queen and his rook is on the same diagonal. So all I need to do here is hit him with, wait, do I have something better? Takes. No. Hit him with bishop c3. He has to sack. No. Bishop c3, attack the queen. Bishop c3. If rook d5, I sack. Okay, so he moves the rook. Now we just take. And okay, black is just winning here. My goal from here is just to trade pieces off the board. So let's just keep things simple. He moves the bishop. Bishop is trying to go to d5, by the way. So let's start trading pieces. After queen takes, we go queen to d4. And all we're doing now is just trading. He's not trying to trade, which is the correct thing. And he's still trying to put his bishop on d5. Okay, let's move the king and then play e4. If bishop d5, I play e4. f5, bishop e5, e4. We just have to play a bit faster now because, okay, that was a pawn. I did not see that move. Let's play e3. Do not fumble this, bro. He took. Let's take. He has to put his king somewhere. Ooh, he blundered again. Look at this. He checks my king, but my queen is on the same line as his king. So I'm actually going to block the check with a check. And just like that, we're going to be winning his queen, and our opponent will resign. Oh, he did not resign. Let's just grab the queen. He has to take back. And okay, let's just push the pawn so that way he doesn't capture it. Let's just push our pawns up the board. One strategy that I like to use here is to keep the pieces on dark squares. Now, because we're playing against a light squared bishop, if you keep the queen and the king on a dark square, it's going to be impossible for you to just randomly lose, especially since we're in time pressure now. Now I'm just trying to get my king in the game to deliver some sort of checkmates on his king. All right, let's just grab the pawns here. He's trying to play fast. Maybe he's trying to flag me, but now he's just going to be getting checkmated on f2. Okay, let's keep pushing the pawns. Yeah, he's fighting though, but it's just game. And that's just a checkmate. So this game we played at 83% accuracy. We already looked on this, so we know that all the moves that we played in the opening was correct. The opponent decided to play knight b5, and as we said, that was a mistake. Queen c6 was correct, and we castle, which was good. Bishop f4, a6 was good, and then he pulls the knight back, which means knight c7 was bad. So, okay, queen b6 was not as good. I didn't want to play queen to c5 because I thought he could have just played knight to b6, and then if I have to go back, he goes back, and that's just a draw. So I don't want to do that. c3, I'm developing my bishop. One thing I learned today is the computer usually always wants me to trade off the dark squared bishop, which makes a lot of sense because whenever the opponent has the bishop here, we want to get rid of one of those bishops. So all of these were good moves. Queen takes was good. I'm happy that I decided to get my rook in the game. Got my knight in the game. b5 was also nice. And that queen h5 move wasn't too good. Okay, now all I'm doing is defending my position. And his time was also running out. Like rook to a1 was a weird move. b4 followed by c4 would have weakened this diagonal. Then I pulled the knight back to b6. Okay, but then he blundered. Oh my god, I missed a fork. Well, not really, because once he moved, takes, and then I take on c3. All right, not too bad, but that would have been good if I found it. And then once I find bishop to d4 in this position, black is just better because once I go pawn e5, rook f6, my position is just way better than his. Okay, apparently e5 was bad, and then he blundered. I found it, and then from here we're just trading the pieces off the board, and then eventually we won a very nice game.